during the time I read that story about driving her back from Vermont to New York. And if she had been given a machine gun, she would have mowed me down. They'd have carried me out feet first. It was a story that was never to be told, never, ever, ever to be told. Yeah. And she never did tell it, except I remember once, for no reason, as if she told it not for my sake, but as if the time had simply come to lay it on the table. She stood at the foot of the chair that I was sitting in and gave me a sort of 25-minute resume of her marriage, and never acknowledging any responsibility for my father's death exactly, but never denying it either, just getting it off her chest in some way. She's a very complicated woman who could be such tremendous fun, marvelous sense of humor, and she really could be a monster. I mean, she had a tongue like a viper's. I mean, when she struck to kill. She'd say the most dreadful things, and the next minute you'd be just cracking up about something she said. Yeah. Bless her. I hope she's all right wherever she is. Yeah.
Talk, if you will, Fred, about the dawning awareness that you were going to be a writer. How did that grow in your life?
Well, it almost is one of those things that you would think would be sort of vague where it came from, but I can almost remember exactly where it came from. I went to Lawrenceville, the boarding school in New Jersey, at the age of 14, determined to be, of all things, a painter. And the man who taught painting, whose name I can't remember, Taylor, I think, was a great sort of super realist, a trompe-l'oeil painter. If he did a bowl full of roses, you could smell the roses, you could see the reflection of light in the glass bowl. It was marvelous. And he wanted to make us all into painters like him. So he had us do geometric forms, spheres and pyramids and squares and so on. Well, that's the last thing I wanted to do. I wanted to do people. I wanted to do faces. I wanted to do portraits. I wanted to do myself. I wanted to do my friends. So I was bored out of my wits by this class, and at the same time, I had, as an English teacher, never underestimate the power of the teacher. Some offhand word can change the life of somebody who was a sort of wild Irishman with a marvelous sense of words, not just for what they can explain, for what they can make real, for what they can make plain, but for what they can make happen. The Hebrew word davar, as you know, means both word and deed. The word is a deed, which can bring tears to the eyes, which can bring a shriek of pain from the deepest parts of who you are. And that fascinated me. So I suddenly began switching from painting to this. And then one day, this teacher, his name was Dick Martin, assigned us, we were all to go home and write a character sketch. And I wrote an absurdly overwritten description of a, I don't know why, 18th century French courtier standing out on a balcony, putting on his gold lace gloves, full of every fancy word I could think of. But Dick Martin liked it, and he gave me, as a grade, a 100. Well, you can get 100s in math if you get all 10 problems right. Nobody ever got 100 in English. And I thought, yes, I'm going to be a writer. And that was it.
That was it?
That was it, yes.
Wow.
I mean, there must have been other factors. That was a very big one. Yeah.
And did you, from that moment on, did you start writing?
Oh, I did indeed. Yes, I started out writing poetry. I don't know why. And my best friend at school, my first great friend, really, in my life, was Jimmy Merrill, better known to those of you who know poetry as James Merrill, who became one of our most distinguished poets, who won every prize known to man, the Bollingen Award and the Pulitzer and the God knows what. And he and I were tremendous friends, but also tremendous competitors. And that was another part of the whole thing, each not trying so much to outdo the other, but to at least do as well as the other. And that was a large part of, I think, what...
Have you, in your later life, have you written any poetry?
Only sort of out of the corner of my eye. This book that is being published, I think, in May by John Knox. I always forget their full name.
Westminster.
Westminster, right.
Yeah.
Has a number of poems I wrote. They're not very good poems. They're all about my family. And then other books of mine have had, I've forgotten, one of the memoirs has a rather large section of poems, again, family poems, my father, my mother, my grandparents. But apart from that, I really haven't. I've never sat down to write a book of poems. I read poetry a lot. I've been reading lately two of my absolute favorite sort of zany poets. One is Billy Collins. I hope, do you all know Billy Collins?
Yes.
He wrote a poem called On Turning 11. How many people know that poem? Oh, we'll run home and get hold of it. One of the most touching, true, beautiful poems. And then the other one is his friend Ted Kooser. Mm-hmm. Am I saying names that mean anything to anybody? I don't think so. Anyway, but I read others. Besides Gerard Manley Hopkins is one of my joys. I wrote a book in which I dealt with him as one of the ones who, I said there were a lot of writers write autobiographically, but in addition to them, there are also those who write with their life's blood. And I named Hopkins as one of them. If I wish I were better at remembering quotations, I'd quote you a few things. If thou wert my enemy, O thou my friend, what could thou worse do to me than thou dost? That's not quite right. Yeah. But anyway, I continue to read poetry and think about poetry, and once in a while I try to write a poem. But during this sterile period, I really couldn't write much of anything, and it's a mystery to me, because with all my conscious self, I really desperately want to write things. So if I don't do that, what do? I get up in the morning, get out of bed, I shave, I put on my clothes, and then what? Got to do something. And the only time that the New York Times crossword puzzle really challenges me is the later part of the week when it gets hard.
Well, you and I should get together. I can do Monday and Tuesday.
But I really couldn't seem to write much. And it was almost, maybe I said this earlier today, I've talked so much I don't know what I said, but I sometimes think it's not so much that I can't as it's something deeper than the part that can't is the part that doesn't want to. And I can't explain that. Why would I not want to? I've told maybe not all my secrets, I've told a great many of them. Why not go on and tell a few more? I don't know, I can't answer that.
Yeah.
But I keep hoping that that wonderful phrase of William Shakespeare, that the bare ruin choir so late, the sweet birds sang, that the sweet birds will come back and sing again, and stranger things have happened. I may hear one singing tonight and I go to bed. I hope so.
Well, you know, we all hope they will.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fred, you've said previously that your identity as a Christian or your ordination or that whole cluster of things has been a certain liability with the literary community.
No question about it. The worst, I think the phrase is career move.
Career what?
Career move. The worst career move of my life was to become ordained.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, my following, such as
There's a lot of pastors that think that too. But that's right.
Oh, dear. Yes. I mean, I think I was, insofar as I had a following, they were sort of sophisticated, New York-y kind of literary people for whom religion was an embarrassment. And when I became not only religious, but a minister, from that day on, a great many of the reviews of the various books I wrote began with a statement, he has become an ordained Presbyterian minister, and that was the kiss of death, absolutely. So it was bad, but on the other hand, I wouldn't have not done it for
That's what I was going to ask you. Would you, as you look back at that, would you have done that any differently?
I think the reason I say that is that it led me to places in myself and in the world that I never, ever would have had the interest or courage in pursuing without that. No, I wouldn't undo it for anything. And
do you think that you would have, if you had it to do over, make the religious dimension of your writing any less explicit, or?
Well, I always leaned over backwards not to be too explicit.
Yes.
You know, I mean, there's very little. I don't think I've ever really written in the worst sense of the word, a Christian novel.
Right.
Nor can I imagine doing so.
Yeah.
And I've always tried to, insofar as I dealt with religious characters, religious issues, I've always tried to give doubt and darkness
Right.
an equal voice.
But I take it that from what you've just said, that the real liability was not so much that you dealt with Christian themes, but that you were ordained.
Oh, that was the kiss
was
of
the
death,
mark.
no question
Yeah.
about it. How
Yeah.
can you trust anybody who has made such an utterly foolish move as that?
Yeah.
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 And I appreciate that. I'm not sure I trust people who've made a foolish move like that.
Right.
I mean, I avoid books by ministers like the plague. I'm exaggerating somewhat, but not entirely.
Right.
There are exceptions, of course.
Good. You know this mantra that's going around, I'm spiritual but not religious.
Yes.
And I take it that people who say that by religious, they probably mean church
Yeah, I think
contexted.
Right.
How do you think about that way of stating the issue, and what from that ought us church people be learning?
I think, I mean, I understand what people who say that mean. I go to church rarely. And one reason is when I go, I'm so often, instead of being in some sense nourished, I am put off. I'm bored. I'm appalled. Part of what appalls me is that I'm appalled. Because I owe the church, despite all the nasty things I say about it, a tremendous amount. If it hadn't been for the church that happened to have as its preacher George Buttrick, whose name I think hasn't come up in this group yet, I wouldn't be sitting here today. He changed my life. I was trying hard to write what would have been my, I've forgotten, second or third novel, and having no success at all. And my apartment in New York was right next to the Madison Avenue Presbyterian Church at 74th and Madison. And I'd heard that Buttrick was supposed to be one of the great preachers in the city, and so I started going, and I was absolutely captivated by that man. You never knew where he was going next. He broke every one of the rules that I think people get taught in seminaries. He didn't have a neat three-point kind of thing. You never knew where he was moving, what the next step would be, and I was moved again and again to tears, and tears are, I think, one of the infallible signs, unexpected tears, not tears when something sad happens, which would happen just because something sad had happened, but the tears that come sort of unbidden are a sign that something of great importance is happening. Great importance is happening. And the one sermon he preached, which quite literally changed my life, had he not uttered those words, I would never have gone into this business. I think it was about the time that Queen Elizabeth II, as if there had ever been any, well, anyway, I have very, very dim feelings about Queen Elizabeth II. I loved Queen Elizabeth I. But he